Tonight, torpedo attack. The teenage swim champ with the world at his feet.
I may not be showing it, but really on the inside, I mean, I'm as happy as I can be.
And Bill Clinton prepares to face his nemesis.
He presented himself to me in a very unprofessional manner.
This case is about greed.
Solar car racing usually conjures up images of small high-tech vehicles crawling through empty desert landscapes. But on Sunday, the space-age entrants in this year's SunRace collide with the grim reality of everyday motoring. Congested city streets, frantic highways and some tough hills lie in the path of the racers as they journey from Sydney to Melbourne via Canberra and Mildura. Susie Goodman went along to inspect the race favourite and found that even solar-age cars need a push.
It's an unbelievable experience. We know how it works. We know why the car is gliding along at the speeds that it is. But you just can't get over the fact that you're sitting in this car that's doing 80 kilometres an hour and it's powered by the sun.
An engineer with Ford in his spare time, Viv Baddeley, worships solar power.
There's a solar age coming for the world, whether or not we're ready for it.
Ready or not, his baby, the Aurora, will finally be put to the test.
Among today's withdrawals from the race...
Built in 1996 for the World Solar Challenge, Aurora never left Darwin. A brake failure stalled the chance to go head-to-head with record holders Honda Japan.
Our fellow teams from around the world will be watching the car to see what it can do. We believe it will average close to, if not just over, 100 kilometres an hour.
While it costs next to nothing to run the Aurora, the all-volunteer team has had to raise $3 million just to get to the starting line. Not a big budget by solar racing standards, but enough to break new ground.
One of the things that we treat as our secret weapon is this specially developed wheel motor using some very special rare earth magnets. It was then developed by the CSIRO to run at about 98% efficient.
The first Aurora, built a decade ago, is effectively a museum piece. Even the latest model, number 3, is still being refined.
We looked at all the stuff on car aerodynamics and just threw it out the window because it was all too high in drag by a factor of 3 or 5. You know, this is like an aircraft that's close to the ground. It glides along.
Co-driver in this race is automotive engineer Katie Holroyd.
For this car, I'm the speed record holder at 125 k's.
Designed for flat desert racing, Aurora needed a little manpower right from the start.
And it moves around much better than a normal car, like you can turn corners much quicker because it's so it's like it's on skates.
There are more than 800 handmade solar cells on Aurora's canopy that feed energy into specially designed aircraft batteries.
Sitting stopped at the lights or sitting anywhere stopped just basically gets very hot very quickly. Like I'm sure it gets up to 50 to 60 degrees.
10 teams will set out on Sunday using electric, solar and hybrid cars that combine solar and pedal power. They'll start each leg around noon, racing in the hottest part of the day.
I think we can increase our speed 10
A computer charts the race favourites' every move. Over the 1,800-kilometre journey through New South Wales and Victoria, Aurora will use the energy equivalent of around 4 litres of petrol. But there are pit stops.
Can you get a multimeter and check those batteries there? That one's sparked.
This one, did it?
Yeah. Seeing people out there tooting their horns and having a look. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing to see, something that you've only ever heard about. So I think also being out in the country where they're more likely to take on solar cells to power their own houses. It's good to see the technology out there.
Solar cars on the assembly line?
Well, as I say, solar cars per se, I think not. But hybrid cars with some battery storage and some solar boosting, and you can park it in the sun and fill your fuel tank up, so to speak.
They've yet to invent solar air conditioning. How was that, Katie?
Hot. So driving a surfboard. Susie Goodman reporting there. And that's the program for tonight and the week. Kerry O'Brien will be back in the chair at the same time on Monday, but for now, have a great weekend. I'll see you soon. Good night.
7 Nightly News with Georgie Gardner.
A perfect day for entrants in the first CitiPower SunRace. They gathered at Circular Quay this morning for the start of their 6-day open road journey to Melbourne. Revved up with plenty of solar power to burn, some can expect to reach speeds of up to 100 kilometres an hour. Leading the charge is the Aurora solar car, designed, built and engineered in Australia. Also setting the pace, a 200 horsepower electric Porsche and plenty of pedal power.
Finally tonight, Australia's cheapest running cars have set off on a 7-day race, not across the outback, but from Sydney to Melbourne. The solar and electric powered vehicles will travel 1,800 kilometres via Canberra and places west in the interest of promoting pollution-free transport.
They cost anywhere between $3 million and just under 1,000. Solar, electric and hybrid pedal-powered vehicles, all driven by a belief in pollution-free power.
We've brought solar car racing out from the outback into the city where people can see it, and we're making that link between the renewable energy in solar cars and practical electric vehicles that can run on the roads right now.
The owner of this electric-powered Porsche insists it's a practical car.
If the range is 80 kilometres to 100 kilometres, I drive 20k to work, so round trip 40, so it should be very practical.
A few last-minute repairs, road maps checked.
So this is where the freeway starts.
And they're off. Outside Sydney, the $3 million Aurora team takes an early lead.
We're progressing at about 90 to 100 k's an hour, kilometres an hour, and we've been held up a little bit with traffic, but after we got out onto the freeway, we've been able to open the car up a little bit.
The only threat the sun-powered cars face, grey skies.
It has been looking good, although we can see a bit of cloud cover at the moment.
As the silent convoy heads south, the designer of the first solar car gives the event his blessing.
Now, saving energy is good fun. It's for the future and it's for the kids, and we will unfortunately run out of oil, so we have to prepare for the day that we have no oil.
Late this afternoon, the first of the vehicles arrived in Canberra, where they'll recharge batteries before setting off for Wagga, Bendigo and on to Melbourne next Saturday. John Stewart, ABC News, Sydney.
The problem is they're not air-conditioned. Angela.
This is 10 Capital News.
The wet conditions in Canberra today did little to deter competitors in the CitiPower SunRace. As the solar cars took off from Questacon this morning, stored energy from yesterday's scorching temperatures was doing all the work. Today it was rain. Yesterday it was baking heat. Despite less than perfect conditions for the Sydney to Melbourne CitiPower solar race, the cars are still running at up to 95% efficiency.
The technology is moving forward very, very rapidly. The Aurora car that you see here today has an engine, electric motor that is about 3 times as efficient as a normal vehicle engine.
Race leader Aurora is worth $3 million, and as the most advanced solar car in Australia, competes with the best solar cars in the world.
When I first got in it, I was terrified of driving the car because it was so expensive, worried about crashing it or whatever. But now it's actually quite easy to drive and it's a lot of fun.
But there's more to the race than fun. The solar vehicles help with the development of energy-efficient appliances and will eventually lead to the manufacture of petrol-free cars.
They're all building and already marketing electric vehicles that we'll see coming onto our roads very shortly. You'll plug them in at night, you'll charge them up, and away you go.
The race continues through Western New South Wales and Victoria over the next week, finishing in Melbourne on Saturday afternoon.
Well, it's been described as the Green Grand Prix, with less emphasis on breaking speed records and more on the promotion of solar-powered cars. Canberra's overcast morning posed no problems as entrants in the CitiPower SunRace embarked on the second leg of an epic journey to Melbourne.
With a $3 million price tag, the world's fastest solar car may not be quite the new car you've been searching for.
Aurora is one of the entrants in the CitiPower SunRace 98.
The whole idea behind CitiPower SunRace is to say to people, think about what you're going to be driving in the future, think about where the energy is going to be coming from.
The race is designed to increase awareness about the importance of environmentally friendly forms of transport, which may be closer than many people believe.
That will be on our roads before we know it, in our carports, plugging in overnight, running on low-cost energy and giving us a cleaner, as I say, and better environment to live in.
While drivers concede a few additions need to be included, like windscreen wipers, they believe these are the cars of the future.
There's a strong future for electric vehicles of various kinds.
I'd like to see myself driving one of these in 10 years' time.
The cars are now headed to Wagga, with the race winding up in Melbourne on Saturday. Irina Serjak, Win News. Just amazing. The high technology behind the CitiPower SunRace solar cars has been well and truly tested today, with entrants having to endure the rain and overcast skies for the run from Canberra to Wagga Wagga.
Look, it gives us the idea that maybe we give up solar car racing and go into the rainmaking business, but seriously, solar cars are first and foremost super efficient electric vehicles.
CitiPower SunRace organiser John Herner's first reaction when greeted by rain for the start of the second leg of the race at Questacon, the $3 million Aurora attracting most attention.
The technology that comes out of that will flow through to various modes, from engineering through to solar powering of houses and harnessing the energy.
Aurora's CSIRO-designed engines are 98% efficient. It really is considered some of the most advanced technology in the world, and although today's lack of sun and wet weather isn't exactly ideal for solar-powered vehicles, organisers assure us there's enough stored energy in their batteries to take them well out of the territory. But there's not much room in these Formula Ones of solar technology, as the only girls' public school team from Mitcham in Adelaide is finding out.
It gets really hot and you get very sweaty, you need to drink a lot and you haven't got time to go to the toilet.
A few minutes later, getting away and determined to avoid slippery roads, the second leg of the race was underway. At 3:45 this afternoon, the Aurora made its way into Wagga Wagga, the first solar car home just 45 minutes behind schedule. The race ends in Melbourne on Saturday. Aaron Heselhurst, Prime Local News.
A motorcade featuring cutting-edge technology stopped over in Wagga tonight, showing us what we'll be driving in the future. This afternoon, the first vehicle in the CitiPower SunRace rolled into Wagga. The $3 million solar car called Aurora was the first of 12 teams to arrive in the city for an overnight stay on their 6-day journey to Melbourne. The vehicles were a little behind time because rain in Canberra this morning meant most entrants had to be trailered into Wagga. The vehicles will be on display at Bolton Park tomorrow morning, prior to a 10 o'clock departure.
This is 7 Nightly News.
Finally, the hot summer weather is being put to good use in a solar race. The competitors gathered in Sydney this morning for the start of their 6-day open road journey to Melbourne. Revved up with plenty of solar power to burn, some can expect to reach speeds of up to 100 kilometres an hour. Leading the charge is the Aurora solar car, designed, built and engineered in Australia. It's the race favourite. Also setting the pace, a 200 horsepower electric Porsche with plenty of pedal power hot on its trail.
Given a hint of an oily rag here as entrants prepare for tomorrow's marathon CitiPower SunRace from Sydney to Melbourne. The leading contender will probably use about $4 worth of power. James Baker, 10 News.
You could be forgiven for thinking the district had been overrun with alien spacecraft when the Aurora solar car landed in Mildura this afternoon. The $3 million zero-emission vehicle set an unofficial world record over the Hay Plains, travelling 100 kilometres in just under an hour.
A crowd of curious onlookers gathered at the Ornamental Lakes this afternoon for the completion of the 4th stage of the Solar Car and Electric Vehicle Challenge. With its big budget and state-of-the-art technology, the Aurora Vehicle Association's solar car is predictably leading the race after the 4th stage. The car wasn't the first to arrive in Mildura, however, forced to lower its speed after setting an unofficial world record earlier in the day. Event manager John Horner was ecstatic about the feat.
We've had some good days and good days, but this has been a fantastic day on the Hay Plains. We always thought we had the potential for this with that particular vehicle, the Aurora. It probably ranks as the at least in the top 3 solar cars in the world.
The Team Huntington electric vehicle, True Blue, was the first to cross the line today. Driver Rod Stevens says it was only a last-minute decision on his behalf to enter the race.
It was quite a surprise for me. I turned up intending to be an official for the event, and they took me aside and said, would you like to drive this car? And I thought about it for about a second and a half and said yes.
Travis McNamara, Win News.
This is National 9 News with Joe Hall.
A Geelong yachting official severely injured in another boating mishap. Pressure mounts on Bill Clinton as the sex scandal deepens, and Todd Woodbridge outguns a big server at the Open. Now finally, a $3 million car of the future has outshone its opposition in a solar challenge that could be a sign of things to come. The Aurora 101 cruised into Melbourne today, confusing motorists as it led the field in the 1,800-kilometre SunRace for alternative-powered cars. The Melbourne-based entry was first across the line at Albert Park, as other drivers in equally provocative designs followed in its wake. Organisers hope the cars will one day be commonplace. For now, though, luggage space would appear to be low on the list of priorities.
A yachtsman injured in a freak boating accident at Geelong. Sam Riley's life-saving message as our treacherous surf claims another life. And thousands prepare for Rafters Centre Court showdown as Todd Woodbridge upsets the world number 6.
7 Nightly News with Peter Mitchell.
Finally, a $3 million supercar was spotted cruising into Melbourne today, and its supporters couldn't be happier. The Aurora solar car outshone its competitors to win the CitiPower SunRace from Sydney to Melbourne. Looking like a grounded UFO, the Aurora set a world solar car record along the way with an average speed of 100.9 kilometres an hour.
Tonight, damage control on Capitol Hill, Cabinet's vote of confidence in Bill Clinton. Call for help as thousands in East Timor face drought and starvation. And open upset, Todd Woodbridge eliminates 5th seed Greg Rosetsky. Australia is claiming a new world champion in the world of motorsport, not in Formula 1 or 500cc superbikes, but in solar-powered cars. After a week on the road from Sydney, the first car to glide into Melbourne is being hailed a world beater.
It might resemble a giant silver cockroach, but its developers believe it's the world's most efficient solar-powered car. Using conventional solar cell batteries, the Aurora can travel 5 kilometres at 100 kilometres an hour, using only the same energy required to cook a piece of toast. In 7 days, it beat other electric entrants over 1,800 kilometres from Sydney via Canberra.
What we've tried to do with CitiPower SunRace 98 is make that connection between electric vehicle technology that is the heart and soul of a solar race car and practical electric vehicles that you and I will be driving on the road in the very near future.
Along the way, the Aurora set records for speed and energy efficiency. Today, all the cars in what's been dubbed the Green Grand Prix made their final pit stop at the home of the more conventional Australian Grand Prix.
Maybe there's room for a solar car race at the Grand Prix. After all, it's all about speed, and this is a marvellous concept.
While the futuristic fleet won wide applause, most of the drivers were simply glad to be out of the hot seat. Race organisers believe this race will throw down the gauntlet to overseas challengers. It might be some years before noiseless, zero-emission cars rule the track, but some motorsport traditions never change. Timothy Lee, ABC News, Melbourne.
A race driver more used to 400 horsepower than 4 horsepower has found a new challenge in this week's CitiPower race, SunRace. The event arrived in Bendigo this afternoon from Swan Hill, proving electrical cars may be a reality in the not-too-distant future.
Competitors in the inaugural SunRace gathered at Swan Hill's Riverside Park this morning after an overnight stop on a run between Sydney and Melbourne. Among those vehicles was the $3 million Aurora, a glimmering sheet of solar panels and bright yellow paintwork, which set a world record while crossing the Hay Plain earlier this week. But a smaller vehicle driven by Panorama driver Rod Stevens is giving Aurora a run for its money.
Everybody expected the Aurora machine to simply rush off and take it, and we've stolen line on it from them twice, and they don't like it. They're looking over their shoulders, muttering and calling us the enemy, and it's great fun. We're really having a ball.
Mr Stevens says it's taken a bit of getting used to driving the battery-powered car after his normal race car.
So everything I know about driving a race car is of absolutely no use to me. With this, if you flatten it, you kill the batteries. It doesn't go that much faster, and you're out.
Event organiser John Herner says motorists need to start thinking about what they'll be driving in the future and where the energy will come from.
We're trying to make the link between these super efficient electric vehicles that represent solar cars with their solar panel on top and practical everyday electric vehicle motoring, which is coming to us very soon.
In future years, it's hoped to attract entrants from around the world to take part in the event. Matthew O'Sullivan, Win News.
Good evening. The CitiPower SunRace was back on the road again today after an overnight stay in Mildura. Race-leading vehicle Aurora was the centre of attention at the Ornamental Lakes yesterday. The unofficial world record, set over 100 kilometres between Hay and Balranald, was still to be confirmed today. Aurora led the field out of Mildura through Redcliffs on its next 247-kilometre stage to Swan Hill. The race will wind up at the site of the Melbourne Grand Prix, Albert Park, on Saturday.
Australia is claiming a new motor racing world champion, not in Formula One, but in solar-powered cars. After a week on the road from Sydney, the first car to glide into Melbourne is being hailed a world beater.
It might resemble a giant silver cockroach, but its developers believe it's the world's most efficient solar-powered car. Using conventional solar cell batteries, the Aurora can travel 5 kilometres at 100 kilometres an hour, using only the same energy required to cook a piece of toast. In 7 days, it beat other electric entrants over 1,800 kilometres from Sydney via Canberra.
What we've tried to do with CitiPower SunRace 98 is make that connection between electric vehicle technology that is the heart and soul of a solar race car and practical electric vehicles that you and I will be driving on the road in the very near future.
Along the way, the Aurora set records for speed and energy efficiency. Today, all the cars in what's been dubbed the Green Grand Prix made their final pit stop at the home of the more conventional Australian Grand Prix.
Maybe there's room for a solar car race at the Grand Prix. After all, it's all about speed, and this is a marvellous concept.
While the futuristic fleet won wide applause, most of the drivers were simply glad to be out of the hot seat. Race organisers believe this race will throw down the gauntlet to overseas challenges. It might be some years before noiseless, zero-emission cars rule the track, but some motorsport traditions never change. Timothy Lee, ABC News, Melbourne.
That's all for now. I'll be back in an hour with a news update. We'll leave you with pictures of Australia's new world champion of motorsport. It's a solar-powered car, the first to cross the line in Melbourne after leaving Sydney more than a week ago. Take care. See you soon. Good night.
Welcome back. The solar car race from Sydney to Melbourne has finished, the 1,800-kilometre trip taking a week to complete. Aurora, the vehicle described as a giant insect, won the environmentally friendly race using solar cell batteries. The car is capable of cruising at 100 kilometres an hour, but only for a distance of 5 k's. The race prompting the suggestion that Melbourne's Australian Grand Prix could feature a solar-powered event.
Maybe there's room for a solar car race at the Grand Prix. After all, it's all about speed, and this is a marvellous concept.
finally tonight, Australia's cheapest running cars have set off on a 7-day race, not across the outback, but from Sydney to Melbourne. The solar and electric powered vehicles will travel 1,800 kilometres via Canberra and places west in the interest of promoting pollution-free transport.
They cost anywhere between $3 million and just under 1,000. Solar, electric and hybrid pedal-powered vehicles, all driven by a belief in pollution-free power.
We've brought solar car racing out from the outback into the city where people can see it, and we're making that link between the renewable energy in solar cars and practical electric vehicles that can run on the roads right now.
The owner of this electric-powered Porsche insists it's a practical car.
If the range is 80 kilometres to 100 kilometres, I drive 20k to work, so round trip 40, so it should be very practical.
A few last-minute repairs, road maps checked.
So this is where the freeway starts.
And they're off. Outside Sydney, the $3 million Aurora team takes an early lead.
We're progressing at about 90 to 100 k's an hour, kilometres an hour, and we've been held up a little bit with traffic, but after we got out onto the freeway, we've been able to open the car up a little bit.
The only threat the sun-powered cars face, grey skies.
It has been looking good, although we can see a bit of cloud cover at the moment.
As the silent convoy heads south, the designer of the first solar car gives the event his blessing.
Now, saving energy is good fun. It's for the future and it's for the kids, and we will unfortunately run out of oil, so we have to prepare for the day that we have no oil.
Late this afternoon, the first of the vehicles arrived in Canberra, where they'll recharge batteries before setting off for Wagga, Bendigo and on to Melbourne next Saturday. John Stewart, ABC News.
To our viewers in Europe, the Americas, Asia, Africa, the Middle East and Australasia, welcome to Through the Gears. We continue the build-up to the Grand Prix season with new cars from Sauber, Prost, Tyrrell and have a chat with Michael Schumacher. A race that uses no fuel is the CitiPower SunRace 98 and it produced a world record. Motorbike testing is underway and we speak to Michael Doohan and see Max Biaggi's debut. Finally, Williams' new Renault touring car and their partnership with BMW in sports cars. The CitiPower SunRace 98 and a world solar car record. CitiPower SunRace 98 was an 1,800 kilometre challenge that brought together solar cars, hybrids and electric cars in a race that requires economical, off-the-shelf material rather than exotic and expensive space-grade technology. Despite that limitation, an outright world speed record was broken. SunRace director John Herner.
This is a challenge at all levels. We want to see those international manufacturers, but at the same time we've set our rules in such a way that we can encourage home constructors, experimenters and particularly TAFE college teams, low budget university teams. We have vehicles in SunRace 98 that are able to be built for budgets of $6,000, $8,000. We have teams here that have been competing simply by using their brain power, and they call this a brain sport, and that's exactly what they've proved.
Aurora 101 was the standout entry of SunRace 98. It was built by a volunteer group of engineers, scientists and students and ran with terrestrial-grade solar panels and lead-acid batteries. The drivers were Dennis Burns and Katie Holroyd.
And the design was done from a Ford engineer, Clive Humphreys, who designed the shape so that we'd have zero lift, and from that so that we get less amount of drag as possible and not having ground forces.
And what's it like to drive?
Very squashy, very hot. It's very hot when the cars stop. We actually have air sucked in when we're moving, but when we're sitting still, waiting for the start line or waiting at lights, the temperature starts rising fairly rapidly, especially if the sun's out. It gets up to about 45 to 50 degrees. So we make sure we take lots of fluids. The optimum temperature is 25 degrees, so when we're moving we're okay because we've got the air cooling the car down, but when we're stopped, like here, we have to spray it with water, because actually when you watch the telemetry, which we have that's monitoring the car, you can actually see the power go up once the water gets onto the array. So as we're moving along, we're actually drawing current from batteries and the array, and if we're going about 50 kilometres, we can run just off solar power. Above 60, we're starting to draw some temperature, some of the currents from the battery, which is when we start, then once we get further along the road, we have to stop and start charging batteries again.
Competing in the ultralight electric vehicle class was True Blue, a battery-powered three-wheeler, which averaged 250 kilometres each day. Driving all the way was Rod Stevens.
It was exhilarating and exhausting, but you're still only doing 60, 70k, that sort of thing. It's a prizing thing, really enjoyable. It's a straight electric vehicle. It has no regeneration. We charge the batteries at night. We have 3 sets of batteries for it, and we change them when required. We managed to get a record distance on the way down on a single pack, which we're very proud of. We managed to get 125k in a single bound, and we had quite a bit left at the end of it.
What's the compromise between speed and distance?
It's constant. If you want to go any distance, you've got to just give it no power, and accelerate gently down hills, edge it up hills, just to maintain a speed on the straight. It's a constant battle to keep the amps at a minimum and still keep the thing rolling.
And what was the top speed you could reach?
The top speed we saw all up was in excess of 80k. The batteries are very good that way. They'll take an enormous amount of current, and then but to get the last, we can get 90% of the battery of the thing recharged in an hour and a quarter, and then you can fiddle for a couple of hours after that with little bits of charge to get 100%.
And the batteries, are they special? What's different about them?
Yeah, they're quite special. The Odyssey battery are a marvellous thing. They're not totally inexpensive, but they're designed very much for this sort of work. They're a very deep draw battery. They have an enormous capacity for their weight, and they have the ability to accept an enormous amount of charge without causing them to deteriorate. You can get, if you abuse them a bit, you can get 300 cycles. If you don't, you can get 600 cycles.
Other entries included Currently Red, an electric Formula V, and Bush Ranger, an example of the do-it-yourself nature of some of the entries. It was built in a few weeks leading up to the race. One of the feature electric cars, Team Alarus's Porsche 911, unfortunately had connector failure, but will hopefully be seen next time. Synergy competes in the ultralight HBA hybrid class, using solar and people power. Last year, Synergy, on just a $10,000 budget, won the inaugural SunRace. All the vehicles carry the registration ZEV, the zero-emission vehicle. Commercially available cells are 18% efficient, while handmade space-grade cells are 24% efficient. However, the cost for an array for a vehicle like Aurora increases from $15,000 to over $1 million. Michelin are making an important contribution with their very low-resistance solar car tyres. The SunRace began in Sydney and travelled via Canberra, Wagga Wagga, Hay, Mildura, Swan Hill and Bendigo to the finish at Albert Park in Melbourne, the site of the Australian Grand Prix. Heavy rain near Canberra affected the solar cars, but after that the weather improved and Aurora showed just what speeds are possible. Under the scrutiny of an International Solar Car Federation judge, Katie Holroyd drove Aurora for 100 kilometres in 59 minutes 33 seconds, breaking the world record, an average speed of 100.9 kilometres per hour. Cars using space-grade cells and exotic silver zinc batteries have been unable to match this performance. What's the capacity of the batteries and the recharge time?
We have about 10 amp hours in the battery, which is how many amps you can draw out over a continuous hour. And so to fill it up, it takes, depending on the sun, if we're about now, we're probably getting 4 amp hours in it for an hour, so that it would take us 2.5 hours to charge fully. And the motor is a motor designed by CSIRO and Aurora. We helped them design it. It's 98% efficient. The motor's actually in the wheel with windings in the middle and very high strong magnets, earth magnets on the outside, especially designed so that they've got the phases all go around very nicely together. As far as we know, it's the best in-wheel motor in the world.
On the run towards the finish, Aurora was sitting on 80 kilometres per hour and not drawing any current from the batteries. For the entire journey, it averaged 70.6 kilometres per hour and had claimed an International Solar Car Federation record on the way to the outright and solar car win. For Rod Stevens in True Blue, the final result, an average speed of 47.4 kilometres per hour and a win in the electric vehicle class. Synergy won the hybrid class, managing 34.7 kph. ISIS returned for another attempt in the SunRace, and the students from Mitcham Girls High School in Adelaide repeated their fine performance. Once again, a top speed approaching 70 kph was achieved, and an overall average of 31 kph. ISIS shows just what can be done when brain power, hard work and enthusiasm is combined. End of race celebrations were held in Albert Park before an appreciative gathering of drivers, supporters, helpers and officials.
Is the man that I've got to thank for being involved in all this. Because
for John Herner, the message of the SunRace is only just beginning.
We have established an international solar car record. We have set a challenge for overseas teams to come and join us. We've created an event that we hope will see the world's automotive manufacturers come along and showcase the electric vehicles that are being produced around the world and allow people to see just what it is, that connection between the electric vehicle technology that is embodied in solar cars as that technology finds its place in electric vehicles that you and I will drive.
Aurora is ready to take on any challenges next year. After the break,
Welcome to Sportswoman, where you'll see the fastest and fittest females on Earth in action. Shooting against the men at 16, now Anne-Marie Roberts is aiming both barrels at her first Olympic medal. The upset at Banzai Pipeline. Sun, sweat and speed, the joys and pain of being a solar driver. Australia leads the world in solar car technology. CitiPower 98 was an 1,800-kilometre challenge that brought together solar cars, hybrids and electric cars in a race that required economic off-the-shelf material rather than exotic and expensive space-grade technology. Despite that limitation, an outright world speed record was broken by co-drivers Dennis Byrne and Katie Holroyd.
We're progressing at about 90 to 100 k's an hour, kilometres an hour, and we've been held up a little bit with traffic, but after we got out onto the freeway, we've been able to open the car up a little bit.
Race Director John Herner.
This is a challenge at all levels. We want to see those international manufacturers, but at the same time we've set our rules in such a way that we can encourage home constructors, experimenters, and particularly TAFE college teams, low-budget university teams.
Falling into at least two of those categories was the entry from Mitcham Girls High School in Adelaide driving ISIS in a repeat performance of last year's competition. The whole school is involved in the construction and the project is used as a learning tool for the girls. At the other end of that scale was Aurora 101. This vehicle was built by a volunteer group of engineers, scientists and students.
The design was done from a Ford engineer, Clive Humphreys, who designed the shape so that we'd have zero lift, and from that so that we get less amount of drag as possible and not having ground forces.
According to Katie, this vehicle was built for speed, definitely not for comfort.
Waiting for the start line or waiting at lights, the temperature starts rising fairly rapidly, especially if the sun's out. It gets up to about 45 to 50 degrees. So we make sure we take lots of fluids.
And as for creature comforts in the seating department,
we found that I was getting quite painful in the back and the knees because we sit cross-legged in the car, so it's actually quite exhausting by the last stage.
Surprisingly, high temperatures are not the best conditions for solar-powered vehicles.
All you need is the sunshine. You don't need the heat. That seems to be, a lot of people have asked us that when we've stopped. Oh, it's nice and hot for you, it must be good, and you have to keep telling them, no, it needs to be cool.
The race started in Sydney and travelled via Canberra, Wagga Wagga, Mildura, Swan Hill and Bendigo. Under the scrutiny of an International Solar Car Federation judge, Katie Holroyd drove Aurora for 100 kilometres in 59 minutes 33 seconds, breaking the world record, an average speed of 100.9 kilometres per hour.
We have about 10 amp hours in the battery, which is how many amps you can draw out over a continuous hour. And so to fill it up, it takes, depending on the sun, if we're about now, we're probably getting 4 amp hours in it for an hour, so that it would take us 2.5 hours to charge fully. And the motor is a motor designed by CSIRO and Aurora. We helped them design it. It's 98% efficient. The motor's actually in the wheel. As far as we know, it's the best in-wheel motor in the world.
Aurora was the first solar car across the finish line at Albert Park in Melbourne, the site of the Australian Grand Prix. Katie and her team had not only won the race, but also along the way claimed an international solar car record. Students from Mitcham Girls High School driving ISIS could also be proud of their effort, having reached a top speed of nearly 70 kilometres per hour.
We have established an international solar car record. We have set a challenge for overseas teams to come and join us. We've created an event that we hope will see the world's automotive manufacturers come along and showcase the electric vehicles that are being produced around the world.
And as for how Katie sees the future for herself and her team,
we'll probably move on to maybe a few hybrid machines and probably concentrate more on the electric side. Also, hopefully we will do one more World Solar Challenge. Our main aim is to beat the people who have beaten us before.
After the break, the disabled skiing sets the pace.